How to play Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls. Hi everyone, this is a special How to Play episode of Fire Breathing Kittens podcast. I'm the Game Master for an upcoming session using the rules for Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls. This episode is a summary of what I learned after reading the rulebook. Hopefully this will be a handy guide for how to play for my players, will help me organize myself, and will be useful for you listeners too, who are looking to play your own Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls game at home. I'll organize this How to Play guide into 18 sections. Game category: D3-1. Stats. Checks. Abilities. Empowering those abilities. Perks. Moods. Movement rules. Combat. Going all out. Status effects. Temporary hit points. Dying. Healing. Daily routines. Clubs, and then I'll build an example character. Game category: Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls is a tactical grid tabletop role-playing game themed around the topic of magical girls. Sailor Moon, Cardcaptor Sakura, and Puella Magi Madoka Magica are some examples. Although the genre is called Magical Girl, you don't have to roleplay as a female character to play this game. Sailor Moon has Tuxedo Mask. Cardcaptor Sakura has Shoran Lee. There is even such a thing as Magical Girl Ore. The genre is about how a regular school kid meets a small cute magical creature such as a cat, a winged bear, etc., which leads to her ability to transform and use magical powers. Like how glasses prevent people from realizing Clark Kent is Superman in the superhero genre, the costume change into her magical girl alter ego protects her secret identity, letting her keep her daily routine of a normal school life. Fighting evil by moonlight, attending classes by daylight. In Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls, each magical girl has an aspect, sort of like a class in other games. And your specialized abilities from that aspect let you do different things in combat than your teammates. To play this game, everyone should have some sort of way to look at a grid that is 20 squares left to right and 15 squares top to bottom. When combat starts, magical girls draw half as many cards as their smarts stat rounded down. You spend cards to use and then further empower your abilities. To use an ability, roll as many 6-sided dice as you have in your stat, dividing the result by 2 and subtracting 1. So a 1 and a 2 gives you +0, 3s and 4s give you +1, and 5s and 6s give you +2. To empower your ability, spend additional cards. Empowerment gives a bonus to the ability's number of dice rolled, area it affects, or duration, based on the value of the card you spend. Apart from combat, there are also mechanics for your daily life, where how you roleplay to balance magical girl combat with attending classes and extracurricular clubs will affect your mood and your report card. D3-1. This game uses standard 6-sided dice to generate 0s, 1s, or 2s to use from each dice rolled. To get a 0, 1, or 2 from a 6-sided dice, you will roll the dice, divide by 2, and then subtract 1. So if you rolled a 1 or a 2, the result is 0. If you rolled a 3 or a 4, the result is 1. If you rolled a 5 or a 6, the result is 2. The game calls this the 3-sided result. In this game, every time you round a number, round down. Numbers can't go negative in Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls, including hit points. Stats. Each magical girl has stats you will use in checks to see if your character accomplishes or fails at what they're trying to do. These stats are power, style, smarts, gut, and spirit. Power is how strong you are and how much damage you do. A jock who plays sports is an example of a high-power character. Style is your speed, agility, and if you can succeed at things that need finesse. Style is your movement speed, unless it's less than 4, and then your movement speed is at least 4. Smarts is how intelligent your magical girl is. The honor student is a good example of a character with high smarts. Each magical girl can use their smarts stat number of abilities from their aspect and from their non-aspect abilities list. At the start of combat, each magical girl draws as many cards as half their smarts score rounding down, with a minimum of 1. Your smarts number is also your maximum hand size, how many cards you can hold before discarding. Guts is how much damage your magical girl can take. Guts tends to be a higher number for no-nonsense type characters. Each magical girl starts with 10 plus 1/2 of their gut score of hit points. When you gain milestones, Guts determines how many hit points you gain with the milestone. Spirit is the range of your magical abilities. You can affect things as many squares away from yourself on the battle grid as your spirit number. A moody, sullen character might have low spirit, while a cheerleader might have high spirit. Checks. When succeeding or failing at what your character is trying to do would have an important impact on the story, your game master will ask you to check to see if it works. Roll as many dice as you have in the appropriate stat. For example, if you're trying to leap a long distance, you would look at your number in the style stat, 3, and that's how many dice you would roll, 3 dice. Because Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls uses a D3-1 system, your result from rolling dice could range between 0 and twice the number of your stat. For example, if you roll 3 dice and get 1, 2, 1, that's the result of 0. If you roll 3 dice and get 4, 3, 4, each dice contributed 1, so that's a result of 3 overall. If you roll 3 dice and get 5, 6, 5, each dice contributed 2, so that's a result of 6 overall. So you can see how the highest result you can get is twice your stat number, and the lowest is 0. Some dice will be 0, some dice will be 2, some will be 1, so the average result will be around the stat number. Abilities. Magical girls can do 3 types of magical abilities: universal, aspect, and non-aspect. Abilities can be attacks that reduce the target's hit points, buffs that apply a positive status effect to a target, debuffs that apply a negative status effect to a target, environmental abilities that impact the battlefield, healing abilities that restore the target's lost hit points, move abilities that change the target's location, AoE area of effect abilities that affect multiple squares on the battlefield grid, self abilities that impact only yourself, and team abilities that affect the allies close enough to you. Action abilities can be used on your turn. Reaction abilities are used on someone else's turn after being triggered by the other person's action, like by them attacking you. If an ability says the word target, that can mean any character, object, or empty square on the grid that you can see. If it's blocked and not in your line of sight, you can't target it. If an area of effect ability would hit allies, you can't selectively exclude them from the damage. Areas of effect, such as cones and circles, can extend outside the range of your spirit number of grid boxes of influence, as long as they start within it. Every magical girl can do the universal abilities, which are listed on pages 37 through 39. These universal abilities include things like a costume transformation into a magical girl, a basic attack, a basic block, a basic dodge, etc. All magical girls know all the universal abilities and can use them by simply spending their action or reaction doing that universal ability. You don't have to discard a card to do a universal ability. Your magical girl's number in the Smarts stat lets her know that number of not universal abilities. These not universal abilities can be either in their aspect or from the non-aspect list. Non-aspect abilities is a list on page 35 and 36 that can be learned by any magical girl. They don't require your magical girl to take a specialization called an aspect. But non-aspect abilities do take up one of your finite number of known abilities, and they do need you to discard a card to use them. You can know as many non-aspect and aspect abilities as the number you have for your Smarts score. Any magical girl can learn a non-aspect ability, but they aren't automatically known like the universal abilities are. Some example non-aspect abilities are Shields Up, Decoy, Healing Touch, Spin Attack, and Surprise! Non-aspect abilities are different than universal abilities because they take up one of your finite number of known abilities and cost a card to use. Each magical girl has an aspect, which is sort of like a class in other tabletop role-playing games. Aspect abilities can only be learned by magical girls who have that specialization. The aspects are Fire, Ice, Water, Lightning, Earth, Wind, Time, and Butterfly. Each aspect has 7 or so abilities in that category. For example, the Fire aspect has abilities like Cauterize, Rocket Jump, The Floor is Lava, etc. The Ice aspect has abilities like Chill Out, Snow Cone, Swirling Blizzard, Snow Cologne, etc. The Water aspect has abilities like Fog, Mist Form, Tsunami, Osmosis, etc. The Lightning aspect has abilities like Chain Lightning, Energize, Lightning Bolt, Flashbang, etc. The Earth aspect has abilities like Entomb, Stone Skin, Earthquake, Avalanche, Quicksand, etc. The Wind aspect has the abilities Wind Blast, Aerodynamic Lift, Draft, Air Wall, etc. The Time aspect has Rewind, Hurry Up, Stasis, Time Jump, etc. The Butterfly aspect has abilities like Mesmerize, Iridescent Wings, Metamorphosis, Butterfly Swarm, etc. To use an aspect ability, you first discard a card from your hand. Empowering abilities. Some abilities have text on them that says they do more when they're empowered. There are 3 ways to empower a card. How many dice are rolled, which can increase how much damage it does. Its size, like affecting a larger area. And its duration, like how many extra turns the effect could last.
Abilities that have multiple ways to be empowered let you pick which way you want to empower them. For example, if the text says size and duration, you pick which one. Normally, when you cast an aspect or non-aspect ability, you spend a card. To use an ability's empowered effect, spend more cards after that first card. Each empowerment effect has a cost. That cost isn't the number of cards you need to spend, but instead is the number of empowerment points needed. The empowerment points you gain for the card depends on its number value, from 2 at the lowest, to face cards, to ace high. There's a table on page 13 showing all the cards and how many empowerment points you get for spending them. Cards 2 through 5 give you only 2 empowerment points and are described with words like dainty and cutesy. Spending a 6 or a 7 gives you 3 empowerment points and a modifier word of sparkling or fantastic. Spending cards that are an 8, 9, or 10 gives you 4 empowerment points and a modifier word of super or uber or epic. Spending a jack or queen gives you 5 empowerment points and a modifier word of hyper or mega. Spending a king gives you 6 empowerment points and the modifier word of ultra. If you have an ace and spend it, that's the ultimate bonus, 7. Add the modifier word from your card onto your ability. For example, a player could empower a Fire Blast with the Queen of Hearts to make it become a Mega Fire Blast with 5 more damage dice to roll. You are encouraged to loudly announce the new name. If you have enough points, abilities can be empowered more than once. Here's an example. You are casting an ability with a Cone 3 area of effect. It has the empowerment text on it, quote, empowerable times 1 size 3, end quote. That means for every 3 points of empowerment, the cone size increases by 1. You discard a king, generating 6 empowerment points. You spend the first 3 points to increase the cone from size 3 to size 4, and the next 3 points to increase the cone from size 4 to size 5. Perks. Perks are bonus traits your magical girl gets. There are 3 types: combat perks, ability perks, and character perks. Every magical girl starts with 1 perk from each category. So 1 combat perk, 1 ability perk, and 1 character perk. Here is an example combat perk. It's called Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friends, and it doesn't have any prerequisites. When you spend a diamond card to empower an ability, you get to roll an extra dice for the check made for that ability, because diamonds are a girl's best friend. Here's an example ability perk. This ability perk is called Undodgeable Attack. You add the word undodgeable before one of your attack abilities. For example, if you pick the ability Wind Blast, it would permanently become Undodgeable Wind Blast. Any target you Wind Blast can't use dodge against it. The last type of perk is a character perk. Here is an example character perk. It's called Fleet-Footed, and it doesn't have any prerequisites. If your magical girl is fleet-footed, their movement speed is increased by 2. You start with 1 perk from each category. Moods. When you first create your magical girl, she starts with a neutral mood. Neutral moods don't give you any bonuses or penalties. The mood scale goes from -2 at the lowest, to 0, which is neutral, to +2 at the highest. The GM will tell you if your magical girl's mood increases, which might happen if in the game you eat at a restaurant, go shopping, etc., good thing. The GM will also tell you if your magical girl's mood decreases, which might happen if in the game you miss sleep, miss a meal, deal with corruption or monsters, or etc. bad thing. On Monday mornings, your mood resets 1 step back towards neutral. The abilities that change your mood during a battle are temporary and wear off when combat ends. At the end of the fight, you return to whatever your mood was at the start of it. One example of a positive mood is happy. When you're happy, anytime you would make a spirit check, you roll an extra dice. Another example mood is bold. When you're feeling bold, negative status effects end 1 round sooner than they normally would. Here's an example of a negative mood. When you're angry, every smarts check you make has 1 less dice. Here's a second example of a negative mood. When you're tired, your movements are 2 squares shorter. When the GM tells you your mood increases, you pick a positive mood to take and its benefit. If your mood increases again, you can go to the advanced form of that mood if there is one, denoted by 2 right arrows and a new word, or you can gain a second mood. That's the most you can have, either 1 advanced mood or 2 basic moods. This also works the same way for negative moods. Here is an example of advancing a mood. Your magical girl was already feeling the positive mood of encouraged. Your GM tells you that your character's mood improves again. You can choose to either take the advancement to encourage that is called being inspired, or you could take any basic mood like happy or excited. Regardless of which you pick, if your GM tells you your mood improves again, nothing happens. 2 steps up or down is the maximum. Movement rules. Style is your movement speed, unless it's less than 4, and then your movement speed is at least 4. Everyone playing Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls should be able to look at a grid 20 squares left to right and 15 squares top to bottom. Imagine that you're looking top down at your character from overhead. Every grid is a 5-foot square they can move forward, backward, left, right, and diagonally into. Your character can technically jump up from the 2-dimensional grid, moving half as many grid squares in the up direction as they can horizontally. For example, if your magical girl movement speed is 4, you can jump 1/2 of 4, which is 2 grid squares up into the air. Magical girls are magical, and they can double jump, triple jump, etc. as an action. But if you don't land on solid ground by the end of your turn, you'll start falling at a rate of 4 squares per turn. You never have to walk to pick up your weapon or spend an action on that. A magical girl cannot be disarmed. If separated from her magical weapon, it disappears and reappears in her hand, ready to go. There is no mechanical difference between any weapon types, but you're welcome to flavor your magical girl as holding one if you'd like. Here is a list of movement rules. If your character is falling next to a wall, you can wall slide to slow your fall from 4 squares per turn for falling to 1 square per turn for wall sliding. If the environment is reducing your mobility, like rough terrain, your movement speed is halved. If you try to vertically go upward in rough terrain, 1/2 of a half is a quarter. For example, moving upward through rough terrain reduces your movement speed from 4 to 1. Swimming doesn't reduce your movement speed, but you can only hold your breath for as many turns as 20 multiplied by the result of a guts roll. After you run out of breath turns, you start taking 1 point of damage per turn until you can breathe again, or until you die from drowning if your health reaches 0. More movement rules. A magical girl can fall prone anytime they want, and can crawl at half speed to fit in narrow spaces. The Game Master might impose a penalty on you if you try to fight from a prone position, and you can't use any abilities unless you're standing up. It takes 1 action to stand up. Combat. Combat is done on a grid, 20 squares left to right and 15 squares top to bottom. You can move up, down, left, right, diagonal, the opposite diagonal, etc. in any direction on the grid squares. Turn order. When players and enemies are fighting, it all happens really fast, of course, but to hear everyone's contribution in an orderly way, officially, everyone takes turns. At the beginning of an encounter, all characters make a style check. The highest gets to go first in the turn order, and the lowest has to go last. Here's an example style check. Your style number is 5. You roll 5 six-sided dice, also called D6. You get a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. Using the D3 minus 1 dice scoring system, what matters is the number that shows on the dice divided by 2 minus 1. So your 1 and 2 add 0 to your score. Your 3 and 4 give you 1 each, and the 5 gives you 2. Your total score is 4. The enemy's score was 3, so with a score of 4, you go before the enemy does. On your turn, your character will be able to talk, and will be able to make 2 actions and 1 reaction. If you move, that takes up one of your 2 actions. If you don't move, then you can do 2 actions on your turn. For example, you can move and use an ability, or you can not move and be able to use an ability and then a second ability. Another example is that you can choose to move twice instead of using any abilities. Going all out. If you want, at the start of your turn, you can declare that you're going all out. If you go all out, you don't get a reaction this turn, but you do get a third action. Drawing cards in combat. When combat starts, magical girls draw half as many cards as their smarts score rounded down. You also draw a card at the start of your turn. Your maximum hand size is your smarts score. For example, if your smarts is 3, if you have 4 cards in your hand at the end of your turn, you have to discard 1. At the end of the combat, you'll discard any cards you haven't used yet, so you can't stockpile them from one encounter to another. Here's an example attack against an inanimate object. It's the start of your turn, so you draw a card. Your goal is to blast down a door so you can save the day. The door has a damage reduction, DR, of 5, and has 3 hit points, HP. You raise your magical staff and prepare a magical girl attack using the first action of the 2 actions you get on your turn. This is the basic attack ability from the list of universal abilities, so you don't have to spend a card to use it. Basic attack says, quote, use your magic to strike at your target. You roll 1 fewer dice for each square between you and your target. End quote. You're standing right next to the door, so you roll for power, rolling 6 dice. The dice show a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, and a 6. That translates to results of 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, and 2. The sum is 6 total. The door's damage reduction of 5 means 1 damage gets through, reducing the door's 3 hit points down to 2. You don't quite break it. The door still has 2 hit points, but you still have a second action on your turn. You raise your staff and roll a second time. The dice show 3 3s, a 4, and 2 6s. 3s and 4s on the dice mean 1, and 6s become 2, so that's 8 damage. The door's damage reduction reduces the 8 down to 3 damage, but it's enough. The remaining 2 hit points of the door are depleted. You break down the door to save the day. Also, you still have the card you drew this turn and your reaction left. You can use that card to cast a reaction ability you have as part of your list of aspect abilities. Keeping your card and reaction ready to go is a smart choice because who knows what's beyond that door about to come at you. Status effects. Some abilities have positive or negative ongoing effects. Positive effects can end whenever you want. Negative effects will say how long they last. Ongoing effects that say they last a specific number of turns end at the end of the turn, after your actions are done, not when the turn starts. Some examples of status effects are blinded, charged up, and pacified. Blinded characters have a 50% mischance on their attacks. Charged up characters get maximum results on the next check they make. Pacified characters can't take actions that would harm others. There's also paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, rooted, silenced, slowed, stasised, stunned, terrified, and unconscious. Temporary hit points. If a perk or ability grants you temporary hit points, those get used up before reducing hit points. Temporary hit points don't stack. If you are getting more temporary hit points when you already have some, the new number overwrites your previous temporary hit point number. When the encounter ends, temporary hit points go away. You don't get to start a new encounter with temporary hit points boosting you from the last encounter you were in. If an effect raises your guts score, your hit points do go up. But be careful, because when the effect wears off, you don't just go back to normal, you lose as many hit points as you had gained, even if that reduction now reduces you to 0. Dying. When one of your 5 stats reaches 0, your magical girl stops being able to do any actions and helplessly can't defend herself. You can roleplay each 0 differently depending on which stat reached 0. If power reaches 0, the magical girl is too weak to move. If style reaches 0, your joints lock up. If smarts reaches 0, the magical girl is unconscious. If guts reaches 0, her body hurts too much to move. If spirit reaches 0, you're too depressed to force yourself to act. If hit points reach 0, the magical transformation ends, and you revert back to being a normal girl. All status effects drop off, which is nice, but if you take any damage in your schoolgirl form, you could die or permanently lose your powers, so you might consider using your newly status effect-free, normal legs to run to safety while your friends finish the fight. A good game master will give you a non-player character to control if your player character dies in a session. Healing. Magical girls inherently heal 1 hit point per minute out of combat, or 1 hit point every 20 turns in combat. This usually heals your character up to full hit points in between combats. Daily routines. Ultra Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls has daily routines. There's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday breakdown of the week, with 3-hour time chunks every day that your magical girl spends in classes, at lunch, back in classes, doing extracurricular activities, also called clubs, having free time, eating dinner, or sleeping. Every weekday, you have 4 classes to attend. In the morning, there's PE and math. And in the afternoon, there's science and writing. If you are absent from your activities, that has consequences. Missing class means you get a failing grade for that day of the week. Missing your club for that day means your mood decreases 1 step. Missing sleep decreases your mood 1 step. If you do attend class, PE, math, science, and writing, each has a different stat check that you make for the class. For example, in PE, you have to roll style and power. Add your style and power stat check result together and add 5 bonus to your roll. At the end of the week, you get a report card that adds up the checks that you got for each class for each day. That number determines your letter grade. For example, Monday through Friday, getting a 13, 16, 14 for Wednesday, 17 for Thursday, and 12 for Friday in math would add up to a 72, which is a C-. If you want to improve your score, you can study during your free time in the evening, which improves your bonus on your roll from +5 to +15. Clubs. Every magical girl is in one club that you pick when you create your character. These clubs include cheerleading, chess, cooking, drama, karate, sports, and yearbook. Every day after class, but before free time, there's a block of time in the day for attending your club. If you complete the club's challenge, you get that bonus listed there. You'll face the challenge by flipping over a card. The number on the card determines the challenge. You can see the challenges listed in the GM rulebook. They're intentionally left out of the player's rulebook. I'll just give a few examples so you can get the idea. For example, if your magical girl is in the cheerleading club and the card flipped is a 5, that's a pom-pom panic. You need to do a style check to perform a cheer routine, throwing and catching your pom-poms in the air in sync with your teammates. If you get a 6 or higher, you succeed. The routine looks and feels amazing, and your mood is increased by 1. If you get a 5 or lower, your pom-pom hits a pigeon mid-air, bringing the team's routine to a screeching halt, literally. Your mood decreases by 1 for messing things up. Here's another example. If you're in the chess club and draw a 2, the challenge is called Pawn Stars. During the chess match, you have the opportunity to promote a pawn. Make a smarts check. If you get a 7 or higher, you promoted your pawn to the piece you needed to win the game. Your mood increases by 2 steps. If you got a 6 or lower, you promoted your pawn to a queen without thinking and accidentally cause a stalemate. Your mood decreases by 1 step. You'll notice that these 2 examples were from the cards 5 and 2. If you flip a face card during a challenge, you'll have multiple checks to make, a multi-part challenge. The first 2 checks give a bonus or penalty to the third check, which determines the outcome. If you succeed at a multi-step challenge, you might increase your mood and also either learn a new ability or gain a perk. Building a character. All magical girls start out with 5 in each stat. Choose 2 stats. One stat will get a +2 starting bonus, and the other stat will get a +1 starting bonus. Next, choose an aspect. The aspect will give your magical girl some stat modifications, with most aspects reducing one stat by 2 and increasing another stat by 2, to specialize you to fit the flavor of that aspect. For example, the ice aspect gives you +2 to power, but as a cool person with a heart of ice, you get -2 to your spirit. The aspect also gives you a passive ability. For example, the water aspect's passive ability says anytime a magical girl with the water aspect assists an ally, her checks are automatically maxed. Your smarts stat is the number of abilities you can know from your aspect abilities list and the non-aspect abilities list. Every magical girl starts with 1 perk from each category, so 1 combat perk, 1 ability perk, and 1 character perk. When you gain milestones in Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls, you will gain more perks, hit points, and stats. Every odd milestone gets you a new character perk, every even milestone gets you a new ability perk, and every third milestone gets you a new combat perk. Here is an example of a character build straight from the rulebook. We're making a character sheet for a magical girl named Mox. First, all magical girls start with 5s in power, style, smarts, guts, and spirit. Next, choose an aspect for your magical girl. The example chosen here is Butterfly Aspect, which increases spirit from 5 to 7 and decreases guts from 5 to 3. Then, all magical girls get to pick 1 stat that gets a +2 bonus and another stat that gets a +1 bonus. For this example character, they chose Style to get +2 from 5 to 7, and Spirit to get +1 from 7 to 8. Because this is a Milestone 1 starter character, using the hit point table with 3 guts and Milestone 1, the magical girl has 21 hit points. Next, we determine abilities. Mox knows all the universal abilities. All magical girls do. Mox also knows 5 more abilities because Mox's smarts is 5. These 5 can come from the Butterfly Aspect or from the non-aspect list. They choose Magic Missile, Blink, Mesmerize, Blood Nectar, and Healing Touch. Each aspect also gives the magical girl a passive ability. For the Butterfly Aspect, the passive ability is called Flutter. The next step is to choose perks. As a starter character at Milestone 1, Mox has 1 perk in each category. The combat perk they chose is called Lucky, the ability perk they chose is called Dodgy, and the character perk is called Wingaling. The very last step of character creation is to pick a club. They pick Drama Club. Voila! That's a completed example character. Hopefully this little rules chat helps my players build their characters and understand how to play. For everyone listening, if you'd like to hear an example adventure, the episode of Fire Breathing Kittens podcast right after this is a demonstration of us playing Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls in a one-shot game session. We invite you to listen to it to hear an example of Ultimate Hyper Fantastic Magical Girls in action. We encourage you to find this game, book rules yourself, buy it, and play a game with friends.